We have a special guest, author of the book Being Black and Blue, and former LAP detective Michael Brox. So today we'll be discussing Detective Brox's 35 years of experience in the LAPD, police unions, policy, and training. So we're going to do kind of a Q&A style here today. And the first question is, you live an extraordinary life, going to high school with, you refer to him as Ponytail, who later became Ice-T, and getting to some, memorable times with him. Being a first responder to the Marvin Gaye homicide, a mind-blowing first day that's detailed again in his book, Being Black and Blue. I would call it almost like a Rocky type story of being knocked down and getting back up again as LAPD officer. And I just first question I want to jump into is, how long did it take you to write this book, and when did you first get your idea for it?
Well, the book actually was a daily write for me. Just to give you a little thing, people, when we did things on the police department, several officers would kind of say, hey, watch out for this officer, watch out for that officer. I think they're keeping notes. They're keeping a little book. So be careful what you say about them. Well, that was me, because from the very first days on the police department, there were more matured officers that said, hey, always keep a camera with you. Always take notes about things, because you're going to see things and experience things that you've never seen before, and you may want to reflect back on them. So I kept notes, handwritten notes, because when I started, we didn't have cell phones. When I started, we didn't have computers or anything like that. So basically, I kept a little black book. So the book actually was being written, not to my knowledge, for 35 years. So when I gathered notes, it took me, I was writing the book while I was in my last year of retirement. So it took me about a year and a half or so to actually put it together and get it published.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting. Kind of adopting, and I see a lot of, Muhammad Ali and different people in the background, that protect yourself at all times mentality, right? With the log book and everything like that.
Well, actually, yes. And because you never know from day to day whether you have friend or foe, people that are within the same organization or outside the organization. And so you wanted to have a documented history of everything you went through for the purposes of memory recollection. And my memory recollection just ended up being some of the pages in this book.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. And that's, anybody else that's thinking about writing a book, may want to do the same thing. So one of my next questions is, did you ever get that $80 from Ice-T from that whole Corolla incident?
Well, I got to make just a slight correction on something. Actually, I didn't go to high school with him. I went to a rival high school. We were the other high school in their gymnasium at Crenshaw High School at the time, and we were visiting their school. I wasn't playing because I'm not a basketball player. I played baseball, right, and ran track, and we were supporting our basketball team. And when, back in the 70s and the 80s, Crenshaw, they were the team, and we were getting the boots put to us pretty bad, but we still represented our our school. But it didn't matter. You're in their gym, and that's called a form of disrespect. So, that's what happened. And no, I never recovered my dollars from him. I'm going to look him up because I want my money.
That was pretty crazy tale. And then this is something I've always wondered, and I've never asked a police officer this. Do police officers like and watch mob movies like Goodfellas, New Jack City, The Godfather, Gangs in New York, etc.?
Absolutely. And it's problematic. It actually is problematic for them watching these shows, because as everything is going on today, and when I was coming up, it almost seemed like life was imitating art, not the other way around.
Right.
And I can give you a classic example of that. It's an unfortunate incident where someone had to deploy and use a shotgun as a defensive weapon and actually shoot someone. And they were complaining when they shot someone with this shotgun that the person did not go flying in the air across the room.
What?
The officer actually said, our shotguns are shit. The sheriff's department has better ammo. They would have blown the guy out of his shoes. So literally, they took the theatrics they've seen on television and put it into real life situation, and they were upset that they didn't see this person who was hit with this projectile from this firearm go flying across the room. So yes, that's the negative about watching television. That's not real life. But we have police officers that actually, equate
reality.
to reality.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting point. I want to interject here because, later on in the book, you talked about how a lot of the police officers that work for LAPD don't live in Los Angeles. They live in the surrounding county. So, I mean, obviously, and I've thought this for years, that's a big problem in the sense that, it does breed, like kind of like what you were talking about in the book, you don't have any investment in your community, so you don't really care about it. But also seeing negative media images of, Black and brown communities, do you think that for newer officers coming in, do you think that has more of an impact, the negative media portrayal of Black and brown people versus maybe homegrown or an old school? Because, in the 60s, 70s, and 50s, there weren't really, there was, of course, Birth of a Nation that, kind of set the standard for how Black and brown people were going to be seen on film. But there wasn't as much negative media, I don't think, involved in shaping racist ideologies in folks back then. Whereas today, I feel like a lot of it comes from negative portrayal. Do you think that that's something that's valid to say that, this isn't just regular homegrown racism? This is racism that is being manufactured by our popular media today.
Well, there's so many different branches of what you're saying in terms of what people see. Television, this thing is called, programs. Let's remember that term. When you watch a program, I know that people can remember so many things that they see on the news, so many things they see on an athletic field. They can remember names of players and everything else. And, yes, the mind is actually somewhat programmed on what they see on the media, because now you take a 20-year-old, 18, 20, 21-year-old, and now you thrust them into training of a police department. And here's the other programming coming on with the police academy, when they instill what they've seen on television in your psyche as a police officer in what we call our situation simulations in the academy. Example, they say that you're working 77 division, and I'll talk about that in a moment, and you're in an alley and you got this buffed up parolee that you are confronted with, and you're going to have to make decisions on how you're going to deal with him, or he's going to take your gun and kill you with it. Now, you're talking to a 20-and-a-half-year-old or a 21-year-old who has been watching television with the negative portrayals of brown and Black people, and now it does come into the psyche of a brand new officer and those officers that are actually out on the street to give them a negative image of the communities they serve. You never hear them say in the academy, well, you're at Santa Clarita at the Chili's restaurant and something happens. You always hear you're in 77 Division, you're in Southeast Division, which are in South Los Angeles.
Right.
You're in an alley. They'll never say that you're walking on Beverly Drive or something, or, Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills. They'll never say anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
They'll give you this negative connotation and this big buffed out parolee. They talk about incarceration all the time, and predominantly who dominates incarceration are young Black men. So now all of a sudden that does come into your psyche, and that's where the problem is. also you're bringing these people in, most of your recruits are coming from a predominantly, well, they're coming from a non-Los Angeles area to police the people of Los Angeles.
Right.
So that's another whole conversation. And I don't know if you want to get into it now, but I've got a whole lot of thoughts and evidence of that. But yes, it does come into play, and it does poison the mind. It does put up a stereotypical, shield in front of you to not trust, to be untrusted, and to treat everyone as suspect versus citizens.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's interesting. And I would like, I mean, Anthony, cut me off if you need to, but I mean, I think it's an interesting question to ask. What you said that you had ideas and maybe some stats about the recruitment of LAPD, and you talk about in the book too the OJB and other, other associations that are, supposed to be supporting and Black officers and increasing Black positivity within law enforcement and in the community. What is the barrier? Because I feel like it's a thing everywhere. It's here in Cincinnati. It's the same way. The people that are policing the inside of Cincinnati drive 40 minutes to get home, and it might not be all of them, but an overwhelming majority of them don't live in the same community. The people who are on a beat in Avondale are not living in Avondale, which is a neighborhood, predominantly Black neighborhood in Cincinnati. They just aren't. So what are your thoughts on the what are the hindrances, and like is it an active selection against people from those communities, or is it something more that we need, that the police departments and communities together need to work on to get that image of police work as a positive thing back in young brown and Black folks' mind? This is a viable career. This is a career that matters. You're going to be helping people. Help out your community. Come on, let's do this. Let's do this together.
Well, let me interject there, and I think you just said a key word there: is young community minds. And the problem with Los Angeles Police Department's recruitment is that they start recruiting at an older age. They start recruiting around college, the junior college level or the university level, and they go outside of Los Angeles to do it. 90% of their recruitment is done elsewhere other than right in the heart of Los Angeles. But I think that what would really matter is to turn Los Angeles Police Department and local police departments into viable careers, is to go after the young mind and to go after them early on. And we can do that by getting back into the schools. We had programs called DARE. A DARE program that was washed away. Now, what people saw when DARE was there in the middle schools and below and above is they saw an officer on campus 5 days a week in uniform that was teaching a actual class. And they saw that the humanist portion of this person, they become mentors, but that program has washed away. So now you don't have that influence, and only time that you see a police officer is whether it's on television, in a media, in a news reel, or as a patrolling force in your neighborhood. But there's no positive about the Los Angeles Police Department. You'll see a billboard here and there, but the actual interaction with young people, it's not there. I started in my career, I became a police officer because of watching, Adam 12, and I had a couple of relatives in my community. And being a community guy, that's what I wanted to do. So with that being said, I think that you hit on something there is, stay within your community. And it's best that you have people working in the community that are of the community so that they do have some pride of ownership, I guess you could say, or something to that effect.
We're all DARE kids, actually, in here. We all, experienced DARE growing up and everything. And there's a lot to be said about that. Because there's so much negative media programming out there on social media as well for our younger viewers. All we see is basically bad interaction with the police. And I think that's also painting an unfair image of a lot of police officers in general now. Um, yes, there's some bad apples, but there's also a lot of people like yourself that got into the police force for the right reasons, wanting to better their communities.
During the time, may I just interject this? During the
Sure,
time
sure.
that I came up, we had what was called police science in schools. We didn't have DARE, but we had a police officer on campus at the junior high school and at the high school level, and they taught police science. And there were a lot of us in those classes, and this officer, he was there every day, kind of like a DARE officer. The guy would play basketball with us. He'd be at the sporting events. Everybody would walk up to him and respectfully, "Hey, Officer so and so." I remember the one was with us. His name was Officer Brown. So that in itself, those interactions actually mean something. And
For sure.
when we have just not recruitment, because we have a recruitment division, every officer has to go out and reach one. If you want to bring people in, it has to be an all hands on deck approach, where the officers that look like me have to actually do the recruiting, even though they're not a part of recruitment. And it's to share within their churches, within their schools, within their communities, if they still live here, and share that information and message of a positive way to give back to the community and support your families.